We here? We cool? Hello, everyone. I'm here. I'm live. I know it's been a little while. I meant to stream yesterday, but some stuff came up. Life happens. So, yeah, I'm here and I'm thinking we'll just hang out and chat and, I don't know, just kind of chill for a little bit. Because there is a thing I want to do today. Well, want to do with this stream. That's kind of festive. Because, we can still do Halloween stuff on November 1st. It's fine. I'm going to give people a couple minutes, then we'll. Yeah. There's a few things currently going on in the pipeline that'll be fun to talk about. Just general updates or whatever. So we'll see. I think, yeah. How do I phrase this? It's funny because you have a whole list of things you want to say, but then you have to go press the good life button, and then your brain's just empty. So yeah, I guess I'll start with a little bit of background information. So for a while, I've had a Ko-Fi coffee, whatever it's pronounced. I don't, what it is. It's the thing with the donations link or whatever. And I've pretty much had one as more or less a dumping ground for little extras and tidbits for currently mostly just Tower Memory stuff. I might put other stuff on there if I think, well, it depends, Tower Memories is the main thing I'm working on, so that's the main thing I'm going to have extras and deleted scenes and different stuff. The way I kind of perceive it is that, if you want to go theorizing in Tower of Memories, the Ko-Fi is a good place to look. Because most of the stuff there is basically canon. Specifics may shift in the actual books, or events probably won't be talked about. But generally speaking, they're more or less what happened. Sometimes when I'm writing books, I tend to change things that I thought I would had set in stone. I had to do that a couple of times in Tower Memories 5, The Girl in Red, because mostly it was just piecing things. Shifting, I ended up having to shift a couple of birthdays to different dates for pacing reasons. Because the original day I had one of those birthdays marked down for was, well, the timeline just wasn't working out for that. So I'm either I interrupt this moment or these sets of chapters with complicated and high tensions, or I just shift this a few days and just have it end there. So, yeah. But the basic principles of how I pace them out still holds up. And that's just part of my philosophy, I guess, is, I tend to world build around the story I want to tell. That's why there's a lot of narrative choices were made, if that makes sense. It's I knew I wanted to isolate the main characters from everybody else, kind of give this feeling of these are the only people you can really truly trust. Everyone else is not a potential suspect outright, but outsiders in a way. So that's where a lot of other things have kind of fed into each other. I mean, it's worked out. Now that we've all settled into it, I think it works. Yeah, sometimes it's hard to say exactly why certain specific things work, but sometimes things just kind of fit together in a way that it's hard to imagine things being done in a different way. So that's something. Yeah, Halloween with Tower of Memories having the influences as says, like Dragon Tower is, almost one to one, a very traditional gothic haunted house kind of vibe. You've got objects that move, voices in people's heads, ghosts that are very literal, and things that are just memories soaked into this place. So, yeah. Very haunting of Hill House vibes, I think. Although maybe a little less extreme. But, definitely that kind of feeling, I think, for the most part. So last year, I decided I wanted to write a little Halloween something for Tower of Memories. But I was like, I don't really do horror stories as like traditional horror stories. Like, I can write something that is spooky, that is tense, but like nothing that is outright terrifying, like nothing that gives you the sense of fear. At most, it's usually a sense of dread. Like, I mean, one of these days I might write a proper horror story. I've written stuff that's horror adjacent, as I've called it, which is like, you know, thriller stuff that has a little bit of gore in it, but isn't like truly horrific. Like, I think the closest to like a horror scene I've written so far is maybe one of the scenes in the Rebecca short stories. But I mean, even those are more actiony. They're not scary, which is kind of the point. So, and like I've said before, when I'm writing stuff outside of the books, it's always about trying to answer a question that a reader, especially one who's going to go outside the books and find more Tower of Memory stuff to read, might be thinking about, or questions they might have that doesn't change the story at all, but might be fun to know, if you're already a fan. So, one of the big questions I've had to spend a lot of time thinking about, especially when I was writing book 4, Thawing the Nightmare, is what was Seraphina and Ethan's relationship actually like? So that kind of led me down this idea of like, what if I wrote a little thing that's like, Halloween with Seraphina and Ethan before everything goes bad. So this is kind of like a little prequel one shot thing. Like, because this is, things as they were before, like every time Seraphina looks back on her relationship with Ethan, this is what it was actually like, because we get hints and bits and pieces, but we haven't met him. Even when we went to Massachusetts, we didn't meet him. At most, we've noticed the absence he has left behind, or the absence that their relationship has left behind, like a giant gaping hole in Seraphina's life that she's trying desperately to fill. And that's, I mean, Dragon Tower has filled it pretty well, which is why she's so stubborn about keeping them in her life, because she knows what it's like to be missing that now. So that was, and I mean, I could have written this from Seraphina's POV, but I think I chose to write it from Ethan's because I think that makes it Again, not scary, because there's nothing scary about this, but it's definitely when you know, as most people who read this will probably know, like when you know what the outcome of some of this of the events in this one shot are, you're just like, oh no, like no, 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 don't do it, don't do it, don't. Is pretty much the vibe I want people to have when they read it, especially when they realize the decision Ethan has made here. And you're just like, no, it's not gonna go well. Don't do it, buddy. They're fictional characters. They can't hear us. They're gonna go make mistakes, and we can't stop them. Although it does kind of make you wonder, what might have happened if he had made a different choice. Probably would have been catastrophic either way, honestly. Like, let's be honest with ourselves. Serafina was a ticking time bomb way before the Ethan drama happened. So, yeah. Anyway, I think that's enough stalling. Who wants to hear me read this little Halloween one shot I wrote about a year ago? And because this is a prequel, there aren't going to be any spoilers. I mean, there's little bits of foreshadowing, but like, it's nothing massive. It's more just like oh, that's a cute little nod to a thing. So, yeah, this would be fun. Ethan intermission. Happy Halloween. Ethan Archer didn't celebrate Halloween, not like everyone else. Everyone else dressed up in costumes and watched horror movies, ate lots of candy, and went trick-or-treating. Ethan stayed home and tried not to look out the window at where he could see Sarah and her parents pass out candy just across the street. He failed every year. But it was daytime, heading to class with his head down as people passed him. Some wore costumes, school-appropriate ones, of course. Nothing that covered the face, had blood, or exposed much skin. That was far from what he was allowed. The closest he got to wearing anything festive was a darker blue plain shirt. He liked to tell himself it was the color of a moonlit night. Didn't change anything, but pretending, even to himself, made him feel just a bit better. English class. They'd been reading Frankenstein, much to Sarah's delight, and probably his parents' dread if they found out. He sat down at his desk and looked up to where she sat. She wasn't here yet, but she still had time. There was a picture of a pumpkin with a face carved into it drawn in marker on the board. He wondered what carving one was like. Sarah probably knew. She talks about freshly roasted pumpkin seeds sometimes. A heavy footstep snapped him out of his thoughts. Morning, Sarah greeted with a smile. Ethan held in his gasp. Sarah had dressed up for Halloween, which itself didn't surprise him, but she'd gone all out. Her brown hair was tied up in a ponytail, held in place by a tie that made it look like bat wings came out of her head. The only makeup she was wearing was black lipstick, which was a lot more than she normally wore. She was wearing a red shirt with black bats, a black leather jacket covered in metal studs, an asymmetrical black skirt with spiderweb themed tights that matched the lace gloves over her hands. From her neck on a thick black rope hung several crystals. Orange, blue, green, purple, and red. Ethan, she prompted. Hi, happy Halloween? Was he blushing? Was it hot in here? Could you tell? Happy Halloween to you too. She was smiling. She pulled her copy of Frankenstein out of her bag. He should probably do that too. But he was distracted by the black nail polish on her fingers and the heavy platform boots he could see under the desk. He was really glad George wasn't in his ear. He'd tell their parents. They already thought Sarah was evil. You get enough sleep last night? Sarah asked. Yeah, I'm good. You seem out of it. Just thinking about stuff. Well, class is going to start soon, so maybe start thinking about that? Yeah, you're right. God help him not make an idiot out of himself because his best friend decided to express her freedom of dress. He managed to take his eyes off Sarah and reached into his bag to pull out his own copy of Frankenstein and left his bag on school grounds. His parents seeing him read this, even for schoolwork, was a conversation not worth having. He'd managed to read it at lunch. Sarah didn't mind. She was just as content to sit in silence as she was to hear him ramble away. She was content now, sitting there tapping her fingers to a rhythm he didn't know. Probably one of her Iron Roses songs. He really needed to find a way to listen to them without his parents finding out. She wasn't smiling. Sarah rarely outright smiled, but the lower half of her face wasn't where to look to judge Sarah's moods, no matter how distracting the lipstick was. It was her eyes, specifically her blinking. Infrequent blinks like now meant she was relaxed. He'd be a nervous wreck dressed like that. She was braver than he was, and that was nothing new. All right, class, last night you should have finished the last chapter. So, who here can go over the differences between the book and the numerous adaptations out there? Ethan, you start us off. He was really glad Sarah had let him finish reading it during lunch yesterday and they had talked about this. He hadn't seen a single adaptation of Frankenstein, but she loved those old movies. I thought it was interesting that there wasn't an Igor character, that he did it all alone, Ethan answered. He just hoped his lack of understanding didn't come through. Sarah gave him a thumbs up. Can anyone expand on that? What him making his creature by himself can tell us about Victor Frankenstein? Sarah raised her hand. Serafina. He never cared about the potential consequences of his actions until they had already occurred. If he cared about the opinions of others, none of it might have happened in the first place. In a way, the creature was about his own unbridled ego being unchecked or balanced out. If he had cared, he probably could have been taught and not hurt anyone. The creature wasn't a monster because it was made that way. It was because his father didn't care about or treat him as a person. Ethan tried to not think about the people in his life that would argue with her. People were born good or evil, and that was that. Same people that would take one look at Sarah and call her many unpleasant things. If people were shaped by their environment, what did that mean for him, so surrounded by people who closed themselves off from the world? Maybe the creature had it easy, being ignored by his creator. Couldn't be worse than being unable to do anything because his parent is right there. Ethan probably could wear black if his parents didn't care. Sarah's mouth twitched with a smile. Not one of those fake ones when she's trying and failing to get emotions across. It was a real one. It was small, they always were. But that made seeing them even better. How could something that made her so happy be an evil thing? Her good mood lasted even as class ended. They walked together to algebra because they had that class together too. Her smile was just a bit bigger. Fake bats were hanging from the ceiling of the hallway. It felt like everyone was in some shade of orange or black or in some amount of costume. Everyone except him. And George, of course, but his brother's classes were on the other side of the school, giving him something close to a reprieve. For now. Mom talked Dad into dressing up as the Wizard of Oz. Not that she needs to try hard to get him to do things. She's dressed as Glinda this year. Who's Glinda? He asked. The Good Witch. Pink dress, bubbles. I'm not familiar. She blinked twice rapidly at him and her smile dropped to neutral. Right, no movies with magic at all. She's a lady who helps the main character at the movie. Mom's taken it as an excuse to get lots of glitter. I suspect after the trick-or-treaters leave, I will be washing it out of my hair for weeks. Pink and glitter doesn't sound very witchy. Her left eyebrow raised. I meant, aren't they usually depicted like gestured up and down at her? 3 regular blinks with medium intervals. It was too bad the lockers weren't big enough for him to crawl into. I'll stop talking now. Fictional witches can be depicted any way the creator wishes. For most actual witches, dressed like regular people most of the time. She didn't do the air quotes motion, but she always had a way of talking around it. Practically hear them. This is goth, not Wicca. There's a difference. One rapid blink. Wicca is a religion, when lots of people practice. I don't, though what I do practice shares origins with it, like with Catholicism and Christianity. Goth is an aesthetic subculture. So, wait, does that mean you're not a witch? Ethan, dude. I mean, he doesn't know. Like, we're taking a step back for a moment. He doesn't know, but also like, ow. Just, foot right in the mouth. just, dude. This is why I don't think I can ever write the day he actually asked her out to the dance, because, like, this is pretty much the vibe. It was just like, oh, dude, no, just stop talking. Because, like, it's the most awkward human alive. But Serafina tolerates him for reasons. Sarah's face did that thing again, where it somehow became more neutral, potentially closed off when it's usually just how her face rested. Did he say something wrong? No, Ethan, she said quietly. No, I'm not a witch. She sounded hurt. Hurt, trying very hard to hide it. I'm sorry? She did the thing where she took a deep breath, something he'd seen her do anytime she felt overwhelmed by negative emotions. It's cool. We're cool. Nothing you need to worry about. He couldn't tell if she was lying by inflection. Inflection alone never told him anything. It got worse when she was upset. He wasn't sure what defense mechanism made her shut down like this. It was his least favorite thing to see. He had to do something before she locked herself in her head with whatever unhappy thoughts she was having. Sorry about my ignorance. I know it must drive you a little batty. He wasn't great at jokes. He wasn't great at a lot of things, but she liked puns, whether or not she'd ever admit to that. 2 medium-speed blinks and a moment of silence. It's like watching a video buffer. That's terrible. Terrible. I don't know why we're friends. She said that, but she was smiling and looking at him, which was better than blink empty stare at the floor. He wasn't sure why she put up with him either. One of these days, you'll learn to tell a proper joke. I'll be to grave by then, but by the gods you will learn one. Smile small, but cute. Much better, even with her making fun of him. Anything was better than her retreating to a place he couldn't follow. I designed this one shot to hurt people. Yeah. Just like, this is, I'll admit, I designed this with the intention of torturing of readers with it. It's fun. I am sorry though about whatever I said that upset you. It's never my goal. I know. I'm not. We're good. I meant that. She never said anything she didn't mean. That wasn't who she was. Deception wasn't in her nature. Nor was forgiveness if he had truly wronged her. But for now, he made note of which stuff being potentially sensitive and moved on. Oh boy. Again, it's one of those. I wrote this with the intention that you read it knowing certain things, and you're just like, oh boy. Yeah. You can almost see why this doesn't end up working out. Like, as fun as their friendship is, and how much you can tell that they actually like care about each other. Yikes. I mean, but I mean, they're both like 14 in this, right? Well, she's 14 and he's in the same school year as her, so, roughly 14. But oh boy. Just, I can't help but cringe a little bit whenever I see Ethan dialogue because it's just like, oh, dude, no. Don't do it. Don't do it. But I mean, we know what he's going to do and the consequences it's going to have. They arrived at their next class. She sat a few seats away. They'd all been stuck with assigned seating in this one. Just far enough that they'd both be on their own, but close enough that he could see her sitting pensively, pencil tracing scribbles onto her notebook that didn't actually contain notes. Ethan wasn't sure if anyone else knew that, though. But even if the teachers suspected, Serafina tended to get low 90s on tests anyway. He'd asked why. He'd asked once why. She'd said she understood better when she just let herself listen. She was listening now. The pencil had stilled, but her other hand was rubbing the red crystal on her neck between her fingers. From this angle, he could see the white wings in her jacket. Not feathered, but bat-like ones. Feathers wouldn't suit her anyway. She sat there like some kind of messenger of darkness. Bats and wings and black lips, a harbinger of nighttime. His parents would have a heart attack if he ever looked anything like that. But bats weren't evil. Nocturnal pollinators and pest control. They ate fruit and moths. Maybe that's why they suited Sarah so well. Misunderstood and cute. He looked away from her to pretend to be looking at the math on the board in front of them. Parentheses and letters were bleeding together. At the top of the board were a collection of cartoonist skeletons engaged in some kind of dance. He considered it for a moment. There was a dance coming, wasn't there? Serafina hadn't talked about it, but the school liked to remind everyone it was coming. He couldn't abandon her in a dress. She barely wore skirts as it was, but no, it was stupid. Sarah wasn't the girl in a romance movie who would fall for her best friend, even if he needed to get it together. As he needed to not make an idiot out of himself for a few more hours. He could yell into a pillow when he got home. There it is. The part where readers are just going to start yelling at the page like, don't do it. Don't do it. Ethan, no. But fate has other plans, I suppose. I mean, he's semi-self-aware. He knows he's not in a Hallmark movie, but there's a part of him that wishes he was. And it's kind of hard to blame him for that, I guess. It's just like... it's a mess. As much as both of them miss this friendship, I'm sure it was kind of a mess, wasn't it? Because, I mean, even though we don't see Serafina's thoughts here, we could probably guess them. Like, if you've read enough of this series to know who Ethan is, you can probably guess what she's thinking during some of these scenes. Ethan, why? I mean, I think it hurts more that she's not even mad at him about it, because it's just like, because she knows that he couldn't know. He doesn't know. And he couldn't possibly know, because she's so secretive. And he's just like, Serafina would never lie to me. We're besties. And the rest of us are just like, dude, you have no idea. I mean, it's not that he doesn't know her, but it's clear that the image he has of her is not complete. Which, I mean, I think that's why Serafina is the way that she is at this point. She doesn't want to live like this anymore. And she realizes that this was always flawed. She's like, no, I don't want this to be my forever. Which, probably informs a bit with how she talks to the dragons. He wrote down the problems on the board. Pretending to have extra math homework meant his parents wouldn't be breathing down his neck later. George didn't bother, but they weren't in the same class, so his parents would never know. The class passed without incident. Not that anything ever happened in algebra, but still. Sarah was always one of the last to leave, and he had no problems waiting for her at his desk. She stood up at the stretch. The heavy boots made her look a bit taller. She was still several inches shorter than him, but still. Yeah. Seraphina is like 5 even, I think. At least in the main series. She might be a little bit shorter here. But, I always imagine Seraphina coming in like just at around 5. So he's probably like 5'6", 5'7". Not not like abnormally short for a guy, but not like crazy tall either. Just kind of average. She turned to him with a smile, a silent thanks for waiting. It was small, like all her smiles were, but the black lipstick made the smallest movements more exaggerated. I'll see you at lunch then, she asked. Not that she ever had to ask. Where else and who else would he be with? Of course, he answered. He watched the back of her head, a ponytail held up by black bat wings. Her steps heavy and confident, uncaring for the lack of eyes that followed her. Why are you standing there looking like an idiot? Oh, no. Hello, George, Ethan greeted. This was why Sarah never lingered after algebra. She made an effort to avoid being anywhere near George, whose next class brought him down this hallway. He didn't know if it was for her sake or his, but he was glad for it. We've talked about this. About what? He knew what. But maybe if he delayed, George would prioritize getting to class on time. That pagan girl. She has a name. She's a menace to society. She has done literally nothing to anyone ever. Well, not yet. I mean, she technically she hasn't done anything to anyone, but like, I feel like that's a statement that's not going to be true forever. Seraphina definitely has like a snapping point, and it's matter of time, I think. And that's just talking about outside the general, like, again, if you know where this is going, if you've read the books, then you know where this is going already. And I think that kind of fills that sense of like dread in this that I was talking about earlier. Like, this isn't scary, and it's not supposed to be. But you're reading, you're just like, oh no, don't do it. This whole thing. This whole thing was a catastrophe just waiting to happen, I think. She's going to corrupt you, then sacrifice you to her evil gods. Ethan sighed. He wondered if George knew that saying those thoughts out loud caused people to step away from them. If he knew that without his older brother's intimidation factor, Ethan was doomed to being completely friendless. If not for Sarah, who took pity on him, or was that oblivious? Maybe even both. I think Ethan is the only person in the world who would consider Seraphina oblivious. I think sometimes the other dragons view her as slightly ignorant, but that's less to do with her being unobservant and more to do with the fact that she just isn't given the information that she needs sometimes. Lucinda. I think Seraphina knows and has noticed and is not stupid. But, Ethan's, like I said, I think Ethan might view Serafina in a way that maybe doesn't fully align with reality. Oh well. George had friends, but he doubted they were the tell about feelings and help with homework types. They were all on the track team, and Ethan didn't speak to them much. But he was certain he'd rather spend an hour being told the differences between cubic crystal structures and hexagonal ones. Sarah was vibrant when she talked about those things. Get rid of her. Get a girlfriend. Mom and Dad hate that you spend time with her. And George would tell them, too. Do you ever think about the fact that everyone else is celebrating Halloween except us? Ethan asked, which was the wrong thing to say, but he just wanted his brother to see what he saw in Sarah. You mean why everyone else is embracing a demon-worshipping holiday and we're the only ones with a sense of decency and right and wrong? That, sadly, was about the reaction Ethan had expected. That was life with George. He didn't understand why he couldn't just see the truth staring at them. Heck, even their church was doing a Halloween thing. Not that they ever went or were allowed to talk about it, but that didn't matter to anyone else. Actually, Halloween masks and costumes were a way to keep evil spirits and demons away. Give yourself an appearance so ugly they wouldn't want to possess you. Sarah had told them that, and history had confirmed it. George was glaring. He'd never hit Ethan, but the look still made him cower a bit. George was somehow scarier without his friends. Don't you start with that nonsense, like any of this is okay. If it's hurting no one, why do you care? Ethan pressed, despite his instincts making him back into the lockers, while George continued to look furious. Because that's how it is. You let them get away with one thing, suddenly everything is allowed. Maybe that wouldn't be so bad, Ethan mumbled. He hadn't meant to say that out loud. He shouldn't have. What, do you hear yourself? Do you? Ethan pressed. You already started digging. What's a few extra feet at this point? Man. Yeah, this is another part of the reason I wanted to write this, is because it's easy to kind of lump in someone like Ethan with the rest of his family, but I also think it's important to draw lines of like, you can see what Serafina might have seen in him to be friends with him in the first place, even though his family is just the worst. Like, we aren't going to meet his parents, but if George is any measuring stick here, then like, yikes. I mean, just yikes. Just a big pile of yikes. Which again explains how this could escalate and how this escalated to the point it's going to go. Suddenly, it's hard to blame Serafina for being like, you know what? I don't need this in my life. I'm going to go 3,000 miles away from here and just not deal with this anymore. I mean, I don't think she blames Ethan so much, but it's just like, it didn't have to be this way. But also, it kind of does. Poor guy. Hard to not feel bad for him, honestly. You can't be serious. This is what I'm talking about. That girl is no good. Sarah's never done anything wrong, Ethan snapped. Then why are you arguing with me? Is that what this is? Because maybe I'm not trying to pick a fight here. The words and energy left him as he tried to find a way to voice the half-formed thoughts. Look, I need to get to class. And then he ran, away from the problems even when he knew he would have to face George later. I messed up, Ethan complained, covering his face with his hands and curling into the tree he had his back. Sarah sat a few feet away, her legs tucked under her as she fidgeted with that necklace. Maybe it won't be so bad. He looked so mad. Who knows what he's going to tell Mom and Dad? He's not going to do anything to you. He hasn't yet. And I would think if he was going to hurt you, he wouldn't do it with so many witnesses. I don't think he's that stupid. I wish he was. What? she gasped. I mean, it's like I have to be careful, and for what? You could always find other friends. Everyone else avoids me. I'm pretty sure George's friends are more intimidated by him than actually like him. Yeah, but if you don't feel safe, I don't know anymore. I keep thinking. Better to be thinking than a mindless drone. Talk to me. I don't know what I keep thinking. Like, sometimes there's a thought there in the back of my mind, but then it's gone. All the more reason to talk. Maybe saying it out loud will get it out of your head. I promise I will be much less judgy than your parents and George. Ethan sighed. You're not evil. I would hope you know that, she said while blinking slowly. You hadn't offended her. Good. I know you and your mother don't go around sacrificing virgins to get magical powers. Seems like too many extra steps. And if you're a good person, I try to be, I don't always think I succeed. My point is, if you're not evil, but they think you are, they also think that they're pillars of moral righteousness. Sarah didn't quip. She'd stopped blinking while he gathered his thoughts. Does that mean my parents are the bad guys here? Sarah finally blinked, once and very quickly. He almost hadn't seen it. Then sighed. Morality is complicated, she said after a moment of thinking. Sighs were usually an ask to let her gather her thoughts, and Ethan's were a mess. I'm not perfect. Neither are they. I can't change what they believe. If they were willing to listen to some kind of reason, we wouldn't be in this situation. But I don't think they mean you harm. But not meaning harm doesn't mean it doesn't happen. That's why I prefer math and rocks. Less messy. See, even now, they demonize you at every breath, and here you are trying to make it seem like they aren't. I can't read minds, dude. I don't know what they're thinking, just, if you. She paused and took a very deep breath. If you ever stop feeling safe, if you think genuinely that they or George might do something to you, promise me you'll go to someone, anyone, even if it's not me. I'm sorry for dumping this on you. It's not your fault my parents are strict. It's okay. I'm pretty sure being our best friend comes with being the ear when you need to talk. Only friend or not. Thanks, I think. And since our friendship is the source of your problems, it's only fair. You're not the source of my problems. They'd be like this even if you weren't here. But my presence doesn't help, and I appreciate you being here regardless of the difficulties. You're also my only friend, too. Again, I wrote this with the deliberate intention of hurting people. Ow. I don't know what I'd do if you weren't here, he said. He meant it, too. If this was a teen romance movie, maybe now would be the time to reach over and hold her hand. But Sarah wasn't that tactile of a person. He thought again about the dance, about her looking at him in black clothes while little flecks of ice lingered. Too early to really stick, but white flakes landed in her hair. Maybe he could be brave and bold too. Just once. Just once in his life. But not today. And yeah, that's the Ethan intermission that I wrote for Halloween. And just, ow. Oh boy, Ethan. Ethan, what? Yeah. it's it's good to definitively know what their relationship was like. And that's kind of why I wrote it, was to give myself that, because like I know what I imagined the relationship was like, but it was easier to make sense of it once I had written some of it and written some of his interactions with his brother. Because now we can finally understand how this escalated to the point that it does. Like, that's why George, went so far as to literally pick a fight with her. A fight he lost. And I personally like to imagine that losing a fight to a 5 foot little girl probably hurt his reputation. Especially if Ethan is right and all of his friends are only with him because they think he's intimidating or cool because he's on a sports team, and then he gets his butt kicked. I don't know if he'll ever write the expulsion scene. I keep thinking about it, but it's hard because, like, whose POV do I pick? Because I feel like there's no good POV for it. Because I mean, okay, that's not the right phrasing. I don't know who the best POV for it is. Because I've thought about Seraphina's POV, but the reality is, I don't think that would tell us anything we don't already know. Or at least, I don't think it would shed new light on Seraphina or her thoughts about what happened. You can also see how this was an open wound for her because, they were each other's only friend for a while. What they're not saying is that they've known each other since they were 5. And this is what they were always like with each other. And now it's gone forever. It's a little bit horrifying, I think, to think about if Ethan is even able to cope with her not being there anymore. And wondering if it's his fault. Because, I mean, given what we've seen of his thoughts, he probably does blame himself a little bit. Because I think somewhere in him, he knows that it's a bad idea to ask her out to the dance. But he's going to do it anyway on an impulse in the most awkward way possible. Because, he's Ethan and everything he does is kind of awkward because he's just the most awkward human alive. He just is. It's just like, well, I mean, part of it is because he clearly is bad at socializing, just in general. Uh, yeah, I mean, it was fun to write. It was fun to dip into that character for a bit and get a flashback to Seraphina's life without all the magic and the chaos and the curse. Well, I mean, she's still cursed at this point. She just doesn't know that there's a curse yet. She doesn't notice. As far as she knows, she's just a girl with a witch mom who can't cast magic. She doesn't know how bad things are gonna go. She doesn't know that in a year's time, her life is gonna be completely upended. So, yeah, it's something. I don't know. I mean, it's complicated. Everything about this situation is complicated, which is why I wanted to write some of it, was to kind of make sense of like the broad strokes. Because it's hard for me to judge a character's personality until I've written some dialogue for them. So, yeah. So a lot of this, so writing it was basically just an exercise in finding Ethan's voice. So that when Seraphina thinks about and talks about him, I have as concrete of an image of him in my mind as she has in hers. At least in theory. And it's fun to have a little bit of foreshadowing and call forwards. Like the colors on her necklace, or the colors of the crystals on her necklace are, the colors associated with her fellow dragons and Dragon Tower itself. That's always fun. Yeah. I mean, how do I phrase this? But yeah, anyway, that was that. And book 5 is The Girl in Red is written. It's currently in beta readers' hands, so hopefully I'll get like more concrete dates of when that can come out soonish. We'll see. It kind of just depends how things pan out. It's one of those, there's only so much I can do about that. There's other stuff that has to be done before I can have that information. Anyway, yeah, I think I'm going to have to call this here for today. Until then, I will see all of you next time. Bye bye for now.